All right, looks like we're live. It's Thursday, April the 16th. This is Dennis Elam, an associate professor at Texas A&M San Antonio, teaching accounting. And today we're fortunate to visit with Mark Goldman. And Mark is the founder of MGR Recruiting. MGR Recruiting specializes in placing individuals with considerable experience in accounting and finance with firms, and also works with firms to find CFOs and controllers for firms here in South Texas. Mark has been a past president of San Antonio CPA Society, and one of Mark's associates, Brian Edwards, is on deck to be president, I believe, this next year.
Yes.
So Mark is very active, which is part and parcel of his business in the accounting community, and probably has as good a Rolodex as anybody in San Antonio in terms of his relationships to the accounting community. This semester, I had asked my students to create a career path, a plan for themselves about what they would do in terms of getting ready, not only with their college degree, but with a certification or preparation and experience. So that has become even more important given the economic slowdown that we're now in. Up until now, is it fair to say, Mark, that demand for accounting personnel has been very strong?
Oh yes, yeah. It is actually amazing how it's changed so quickly. But yes, if you would have asked me about a month and a half ago, that would have put us in early March of 2020. I would have been saying, oh yes, a job is just waiting for you. You have to do a few things, but a job is just waiting for you. And obviously, we're entering a possibly different time now.
Yeah, things have really turned around. And one of the points that I want to make to the students with this interview is that whereas there was terrific demand, as you say, just a couple of months ago, a demand for accounting happens because lots of firms are making lots of money. And I mean, that's a very basic thing there. Well, leafing through the Wall Street Journal today, energy firms are going bankrupt. Penny's just missed a debt payment. They're headed to bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
Sears is surely going to follow. Hundreds of airplanes are sitting on runways, airports somewhere, not flying. Ditto for cruise lines. In fact, airline traffic's down 95% from a year ago. So we're looking at a very different world. What would you tell a student about getting prepared in terms of accounting certifications, just as a general starting point, Mark?
Sure. Something that goes back and forth with the job market is the attitude about certifications. There again, if we were talking a couple months ago, last year, it was an interesting dynamic. A student could say that they were going to pursue a certification. They could put CPA eligible on their resume, and an employer would accept that. A student could say that they're interested in a certification, and that would be good enough, actually, for the interview process. I think we're going to be returning back to the times of several years ago where that's nice. However, now the employer wants to know what your plan is and what you've done about it. So it's great that you're eligible, or it's great that you have intention, but have you thought about what review course you're going to use? Have you put a time frame on when you're going to start studying and taking the first test? They're going to require more proof.
Exactly. And that is what I'm trying to get the students to understand in terms of creating a career plan to get there. I think, here in Texas, one has to file a written intent to take the CPA test, correct?
Yes, letter of intent.
So that would certainly be a first step to show the employer that you were serious. Now, and I'm not sure, there's an 18-month time period that one has to pass all four parts of the test. Now, does that start at the date of application or when you take the first uh, exam?
Actually, the 18-month period starts from when you pass, actually from the date that you took the first part that you passed.
Okay. And I think that part of their plan also needs to be, we've got what, a testing window of every 2 months and 15 days, and you can take as many as you want in that period.
You know, I'm not 100% certain. That's the ballpark. That's correct. And actually, there's some changing of the or some flexing of the rules right now because of the COVID virus situation. But I think still the secret to passing the exam is not, you know, letting yourself think you're done until you really are. You study, you schedule, you study, you take apart, you schedule, study, you take apart, and you have to knock them out. Yeah.
Well, and of the students that we have had who passed, that was very much the situation. I recall one in particular saying, "Well, Prof, I'm not going to do this until I know that I'm absolutely ready." And he passed all four parts the first time.
Wow.
And I think, and whoever happens to watch this video, uh, Mark and I are not specifically in the CPA exam review business, although both of us are CPAs and have taken the test, but that was some time back. And as Mark suggests, the rules have changed since we took it, and the rules are changing again for some flexibility about the virus situation. So please be advised that one needs to check with the state board about exactly what the current rules are. But I would think that whose review materials you're going to use, when are you going to take which exam, and specifically, when and where are you going to study? I've got a lot of students who already have families, and obviously that takes a lot of time. But if you're going to effectively study for this, you're going to have to find a time of the day when you're uninterrupted and you can spend, I would say, at least 2 hours really going over the material and reviewing hundreds of questions. Your take, Mark?
Yes, no, I would agree. And to take that one step further, like I was alluding to earlier, I think it's going to be important for the individual to be able to verbalize that plan when they're in an interview. Because there again, it used to be okay if if you mention the word certification during an interview, you know, the employer, you know, may uh, you know, be convinced just at that. But now I really do think it's going to be um, a vital part of the interview to be able to verbalize what your plans are, because the employer knows getting a certification is difficult. They know it's not something to be taken for granted, and since you're likely to be, you know, competing against more candidates for the same job, you know, the better you can verbalize your plans, the better you're going to do in the interview.
And that's why I've asked the students to actually put the plan in writing so that they could present that, showing a timeline, whose review material are you going to use, and what's the order you're going to take the exams in. Um, when one looks at any of these certifications, the pitch is always that, well, you're going to make more money over your lifetime if you're certified. Well, again, as Mark is saying, I think the bar has been raised much higher than that, because you might get hired, but I don't think that you're really going to advance in a career path without a certification. Mark, what would you say?
Yes, I've said this even in excellent job markets, but particularly in a weaker job market, the cruel thing or the difficult thing about certification is most certifications are much easier to pass the closer you are to your college education because they're comprehensive in nature. And so in the beginning, it's not quite as important that you're obviously, 1 year out of college, it's not quite as important that you're certified. It's good to have a plan. But for people that put it off, it gets more and more difficult. And sadly, that's during the time it's becoming more and more important. Having a certification gives you options in your career. And it, frankly, without a certification, it can be limiting. So what I mean by that is it may not matter for your staff accountant or senior accountant role, but as you become an accounting manager or a tax manager, audit manager, public or industry, it really doesn't matter. As you're going for those controller positions, obviously partner, but controller, CFO positions, more and more of the individuals you're competing against are certified. And secondly, there's less of those opportunities available. So the competition really is a little more fierce.
Well,
It's something
no,
that it's something to take very seriously early in your career because it's much easier to pass during that time, believe it or not.
well, that's absolutely correct because you're used to studying. And another thing is that the very nature of the accounting profession is changing. Here, the last few years, we've had sweeping changes in revenue recognition, lease accounting, COSO, internal control. All these things are changing all the time. So the further you get away from when you were in college, you're subject to a whole new set of rules that you're not familiar with. So that's another reason to follow through with what Mark is saying, that you need to do this as soon as possible.
Yes.
Now, there are other certifications.
Yes.
In your and my lifetime, CPA was sort of the gold standard that one was expected to have. But as accounting has gotten to be a larger and larger field, internal audit has become more important, and management accountant has become more important.
Mm-hmm.
Here in San Antonio, we've got a very active internal audit group with hundreds of members,
Mm-hmm.
and the management accounting group has certainly been revitalized with Jennifer Larson and Mike Lovelace doing a lot of work on that. How do you see a certification like internal audit or management accounting, Mark?
No, I really, in fact, I was about to bring that up. I'm glad you brought that up. First of all, they hold a lot of value. I'm a past president of the Institute of Management Accountants here locally myself, which is the certifying body for the CMAs. It's been a while, but I used to be involved in the IIA as well. Both certifications hold a lot of value. I really think it depends where you are in your career and what, it's a case-by-case basis what your situation is. What I mean by that is if you're approaching graduation, you're getting ready to get out of school, and it's still an option to get the extra hours you would need to take the extra college hours you would need to take to be able to sit for the CPA certification. Honestly, if that's possible, I'm biased at going that route. If it's not possible, or maybe you're later on in your career and you would have to go back to school, I realize that's very difficult. And then honestly, I probably would look at one of the other certifications. I'm a little biased towards the CPA certification because I believe it gives you more options. You can compete very well for jobs in internal audit and in industry with the other two certifications you were mentioning. However, the CPA certification, at least in the marketplace, is a little more universally applicable. One of the reasons my father was a CPA, and one of the reasons he wanted me to become a CPA was that he knew that no matter what the circumstances were, if nothing else, I could go hang out a shingle. I could put my own sign out as a self-employed CPA. And with the other certifications, it's a little more difficult to do that. It's a little more limiting. So I would say if you want a more widely applicable certification, then the CPA is probably a better career choice, honestly. However, it is also more of a commitment and frankly, a little more expensive, because of the school requirements. So you have to weigh those two. I find it's interesting how many CMAs are also CPAs, actually, including, I think, some of the individuals you mentioned. So sometimes there's value in both. It really just depends on, there again, what career path you want to take.
Okay. And certainly here in Texas, we're up to number, I think, about 120,000 as far as the number of certificates that have been issued since it began back at the turn of the last century. And I think there's about 60,000 of those that are still actively practicing in the state. And those numbers certainly dwarf the number of CIAs or CMAs, but those are coming on. And if you want what I would call an industry-specific certification, those are becoming more accepted. I know I had a presentation to my class, and one of the ladies was a CIA, and at her place of business, that was seen as a terminal certification if you're an internal auditor.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what Mark means by it's more limiting, that she probably doesn't have many choices, but if in fact you want to be an internal audit, that works well. Okay. I'm going to guess that you haven't seen a big change yet, but just based on what we're talking about, seeing the slowdown in business, and no one knows how quickly any of this would, when I read that a year ago on any given day, there was about 2.2 million people that got on airplanes in the United States. And here a week ago, there were only 94,000. Well, that's a huge difference. I mean, that's 5% of where it was. And I don't know how quickly everybody's going to want to hop on an airplane again, and neither do the airlines.
Yeah.
But amid that uncertainty, our purpose here today is to urge students to do as much as you can to embellish and burnish your credentials. And the best way to do that is through accounting certifications, and the CPA would be the top of the pyramid. Does that sound accurate, Mark?
Yes, it does. And to your point about the CIA, I mean, I agree. I mean, internal audit is a wonderful career. I think that, and actually, if I were in that area, I would be getting a CIA certification as well. I think that the later decision is where do you intend to go after that? If you want to make your career ultimately just an internal audit, be an internal audit director, and that's the end point, then that's probably sufficient. But if you're thinking maybe of going into general accounting and eventually in a controller or CFO role, that's where you really need to think about the CPA or the CMA designation. Or if internal audit is something you're interested in now, but you're thinking, maybe someday having your own audit firm, well, then maybe you better look at the CPA certification in addition. So it really is a case-by-case basis. So, yeah.
Well, and we want the students to understand that if you're going to be with a size organization, and for example, here in San Antonio, a Valero, an HEB, a USAA, to really move up, they are going to expect an individual to have a certification at the appropriate level simply because that's who they are.
Yes, you may have been at the same meeting, but I one of the memories that sticks out in my mind from FEI meetings is we had the CFO from Halliburton come to.
I was at that meeting. Oh, yes.
One of his very pointed comments I remember is that he said, I don't care what certification you get, but I do value all certifications, and I want all of our people to have certifications. It does help you move up. And so that was very pointed comment, and I'll remember that one for a while.
In fact, I think I was the one that asked him that question. But
Great question.
So, but and he indicated that they gave a bonus to the person when they passed, and
Yes.
that was certainly the way that you were going to advance at the company. Well, okay, I think we've covered some valuable ground here for students. And Mark, you bring a lot to the table in terms of all the individuals that you know. Let me also mention to everybody that Mark has a podcast where accountants go, and you're up to what, number 170 now, Mark?
Yes. Yeah, we've released 170 episodes, and we have a whole lot more in the hopper. So
Yeah, and all of those are available on the website where accountants go, and he has done so many that he now has them listed by categories of industry and even education. So I would urge you to take a look at that, because there is a tremendous amount of insight available there for students planning their accounting career. In addition, you've taken that information and published a book, 49 Tips for Your Accounting Career. Isn't that right?
yes, thank you very much. And it's available on Amazon.
And as a matter of fact, we have a copy of that book on reserve in the A&M San Antonio Library.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Mark, thank you for taking time to visit with us today. This has been a recorded interview, and we'll be putting it on Blackboard for our students.
Wonderful. I really appreciate it. This was fun. Thank you, Dennis.
Okay. Thank you, Mark, and we'll conclude now.